days, you best be interviewing the old-timers before it's too late. They've got a lot of great stories to tell.
Online here we got Randy Hecker, who has a wealth of knowledge and is one heck of a researcher and explorer among a lot of other things, and he's agreed to tell us a few stories. And so with that, Randy, I'll just turn it over to you and take it over.
Have you heard anything about the Trabuco treasure up in northwestern New Mexico?
I have not.
You have not.
I have not.
It started out with 5 rich men down in Mexico in 1930s who were upset about the way Mexico was going and revolutions and all kinds of other things. They transferred all their money into gold, accumulated 16 tons, and shipped it up into the United States. They shipped it up on a mesa somewhere in the northwest corner of New Mexico, up in what is either the Ute Indian land or the Navajo Indian land. Well, back in about 1978, I actually got involved in a team that was looking for that. The involvement wasn't very long because we found out about some other group that was looking for it that was actually willing to kill to keep others out of the way.
Wow.
So as soon as we found that out, we just backed out. The thing was, these 5 men, within a couple of years, there was only one of them left, and that was a guy named Trabuco. He tried to get it to sell to the United States government. The government said, well, we'll confiscate it, and then we'll pay you what we think you should deserve. He wasn't happy with that, and they went round and round until about 1952, I think, was the last. He turned up briefly in Mexico, briefly in Spain, and came back here for a while, and then left to parts unknown, and he's undoubtedly dead by now. And that 16 tons of gold is still sitting up there somewhere in the northwestern part of the state of New Mexico, up on that high mesa country there at northwest of Farmington. I'm sure you know where Farmington's at.
Yeah, so I have heard that 16 tons of gold story, and it seems like I did hear stories about the government flying in and getting things, or some, vaguely it's coming to my mind, but I didn't know where the 16 tons came from. I didn't know if it was a Spanish treasure, but you're saying it was some people that converted all their money to gold.
Right. And that was done in 1932. They got it up there by 1935. Just before the price of gold was to be increased with the TARC, because they bought it all at $20 an ounce. They wanted to sell it to the government at $32 an ounce, in which case they would have made $7 million right there. But the government said, well, we'll confiscate it first. And then the other guys began to die, and they died kind of unusual ways that weren't murder. Like one got killed by a gore of a bull. One got thrown off a horse and hit a rock in the back of his neck. One was shot by some highwaymen that were trying to rob him. They come him down with a machine gun. There was a lot of stuff going on in Mexico. It was really weird at the time. So it all ends up in this one guy's hands, and he spent the next 27 years trying to get the government to pay him a fair price for it. He's long gone, and nobody knows where that thing is up there. How I got involved with it, I knew some men that were looking for it. I knew this one guy who was in his 50s, and I was like in my 30s. And he had a friend who had spent like 10 years trying to douse a location for this thing. And at the end of 10 years, he thought he had it worked out, and then he had a heart attack and died. And the guy says to me, do you know how to douse? I said, yeah, I can math douse. So he takes me down to Holcomb's in Albuquerque, which is where you buy your math at the time, and pulls this map out of the 4 corners there and says, okay, where do you think it's at? And I just ran my hands over it, pointed to a spot, and he goes, dead white, takes the map, puts it in the drawer, and says, we're leaving now. And I said, what's going on? So it took my friends 10 years to get the exact same spot. It got you 10 seconds. So we were going to move on that. We had about 5 members, and one day one of them was out shopping when some skinhead came up to him, grabbed him by the arm, cut him with this big knife, and said, we're going after this thing, and if we catch you out, it will kill all of you.
Really?
So it kind of fell by the wayside. At that point, we were starting to look into making contact with either a Navajo attorney or an attorney set to do federal cases on Navajo land so that we could get permission to go in with the Indians, not try and steal it after minutes of like some people would. And unfortunately, it just all went by the wayside.
So, do you still think it's something there? Do you think the other people found it? Is that something you'd still be willing to go after? Because I have a lot of Navajo friends.
I wouldn't mind going after it because there's something these Nazis never knew. Incidentally, that's where the story of Nazi gold in New Mexico comes from. It's their
That's
effort to try and recover it.
the Nazis was trying to recover it. You say, I know that Richard Walburn. Do you know who Richard Walburn is?
No, I do not.
He's the one that turned that into the Nazi gold, and he also turned it into the Lou treasure map. I have to dig out his letter. He wrote me a letter all about that in '94 or '92 or something like that. I'll have to dig that out and read read what all he said about that. But that's what he came to the conclusion of. Is that's what he thought. Now, whether it's right or not, who knows? But
Well, the thing is, what people don't know, and this goes way back, in the records of Solomon, the king of Israel, he stated, all treasures are guarded by angels. Little treasures by small groups of angels and big treasures by very big groups of angels. And they will not let the wrong people take them. And I am not an expert on Spanish traps. Either Spanish traps or Aztec or Mayan. They had all kinds of ways of setting up things so they'd be death traps to anybody who tried to dig them out. And I'm not an expert on that at all. It would be nice to have somebody who did know those things because I do know where there's a few at. As I was telling you one time, there's a lot of different treasures in New Mexico. And I lived in New Mexico for 20 years, and I looked at a lot of stuff. I had a friend who is now retired from Sandia Base, held a very high security clearance there in photo interpretation, who one day I read a story of a gold bar being found down in an apple orchard to the east of Sandia Base. And I happened to mention it to him, and he said, yes, that was my family's treasure.
really,
Lost it. Have you ever heard of a thing called the Mina de la Perdida?
I haven't.
Well, it's also up in northern New Mexico in the southern part of San Juan de Cristo, so that only thing that means is Spanish for the lost mine. It was his Spanish mine until they got run out of there in 1682.
Really?
At the time of the revolt. When they came back, they could never find it again. So they finally moved down into the southern Manzanos and started working mines in that area.
Uh-huh.
But he didn't know where they were. He just knew it was a family record. That's what they did. And I've done some things on Google Earth down there in the southern Manzano Mountains, which is where this is at. And there's some interesting formations down there that could be a source for a lot of stuff.
Huh.
I do a lot of work on Google Earth. I do a lot of work with geologic maps. I do a lot of work with topo maps, putting all three of those together. I consider myself to be an independent mineral specialist, which means that I'm involved in small-scale mining, small-scale development of highly specialized properties.
And I know you was telling me you developed a special way of how to process some of these ores that better than what they use nowadays, or no, you told me that you don't need to use the chemicals like they do nowadays.
What I try to do is find ways of working gold and silver that are completely non-polluting, and even platinum group metals that are non-polluting. Now, I'm on something right now that is very unique, but I'm not going to explore that, okay?
Yep, I don't blame you.
I've always been involved. I've been involved in this since I was 16 when we went up to the East Fork of the San Gabriel River in Los Angeles and did a little panning, and that got me started. And I spent a lot of time in my growing up years up there in the East Fork of the San Gabriel. I finally moved over to what's called Cow Creek, which is a branch of the San Gabriel. And one day while I was working up in there, I found this little canyon and I hiked up it. And there was this little tiny stream running over some greenish colored basic rock called serpentine. So I panned on it and I found platinum right there. Metallic platinum. I took it down to Fullerton College, ran it through the lab, and they came up and said, this is definitely platinum. But it's an area that's deeded only for recreational panning and sluicing, so unless you own the property, you can't go in there and do anything with it. And then I left the state, and I've only been back a couple of times for very short periods of time.
Yeah.
So I've never done anything with that. I'd be willing to turn that over to somebody who lives out there who would like to pursue that. I'd be willing to turn it over to the knowledge for just They want it, they can have it.
If you give it to them though, and they find it and it's there, they ought to treat you right though. So
Well, yeah, but
that's up. So that
I've had enough people in this industry actually stab me in the back over a little bit of money that I don't care.
yeah
My aim is not to be rich.
yeah
I got involved in a very big mining project once in New Mexico. Um, it would have been a huge multi-billion-dollar producer in silver and gold. And I actually found a way of getting the silver out. And I had a major refinery that wanted to produce the silver immediately.
uh-huh
And they come back and said, sorry, we're not interested in silver. We only want gold. And I said, well, you got to crush the rock. You got to process it. This way, you're going to make $10 billion, and the rock's crushed for you. You can then turn around and do the gold any way you want to. No, we're not going to do that.
Really?
So they pushed me out, and that was that. And they never found out how I did it either.
So they wasn't able to get it out, huh?
Yeah, people are really weird that way. I developed the idea a long time ago that if I find something that I can use, I help people. And I have given plenty of systems away to people and say, if you can find something, do what you want to do with it. If you want to pay me, I'll be happy to take it, but I'm not insisting on it.
Yeah. Well,
I believe the goal of all of this is to help people.
Cool.
The more we do from treasures, the more we do from mining properties, the aim is just to help people.
Yeah.
As many people as possible.
So I know that talking with you before, Randy, that you've prospected and explored and researched all over the place. I know you've researched up here in Utah where I live, down in Arizona and New Mexico. Man, you've just been all over the place researching.
That's kind of a big thing in me. I love research. I love digging into the history of things, because to me that's just as important as what you find there.
Well, and that's how it all starts is the research. It all starts from there. You got to validate and have something to go off of.
If I may interject a little bit here, I got involved in the Lost Adams mine in New Mexico, which is supposed to be one of the big mines in the West.
Uh-huh.
Billions of dollars in this small canyon of placer gold. And the first thing I discovered in doing research, there was actually 5 Lost Adamses in the United States.
Really?
3 in Arizona and 2 in New Mexico. But only one of them involves 2 mountains that you can see from a certain spot in eastern Arizona that look like what are called 2 De Los Piloncillo peaks, and 2 little mounds of sugar standing beside each other, brown sugar. What the Mexicans call them is De Los Piloncillos. And I found those too. But it took me a lot of years to find them. And when I found them, then I knew immediately I had the secret to the Lost Adams. And since I realized I had the secret, then all of a sudden the other stories started playing in and out. And these 5 different accounts tried to become one account, even though they're from 2 different states. To separate them.
Uh-huh.
And only one of them involves an incredibly deep canyon with vertical walls that it took them forever to get down into, and a whole day just to get down to a very narrow trail on the bottom of the canyon. And that one's in Arizona, and it's on the Apache Indian Reservation. And you have to have the clearance of the Apaches to even go look for it. It's kind of north of the White Mountain Reservation country there. The one I looked into, the one everybody thinks is the vertical canyon that's deep, and the canyon itself is real narrow. What I found out was that doesn't match any of the country. So I spent a lot of years looking over topo maps, looking over whatever I could find to try and get something that would match that description. And I finally came to the conclusion there wasn't anything that matched that description. So then I went back to the original history of what it talked about. The accounts of the men who went there, what they saw, and when they got struck by the Apaches and all but 3 of them were killed, how they got out. Now, one of the reports is that this cook took off up the east wall in the dark with Apaches coming after him, and he's supposed to have gone up a vertical wall in that condition.
Yeah.
No, it's a vertical wall. It's a fairly gentle wall. And once I realized it was a fairly gentle wall, I was able to put a canyon to it. And I know where that is. And I haven't been there yet, primarily because it takes money to go there, and right now I don't even have a car. We blew the engine out of it coming back from Denver,
Terrible.
and it's going to take about $6,000 to get it repaired.
Yep.
So, but when I do get it repaired, next objective is to get a truck, and then I'm going to head down there.
Cool.
I know about a lot of stuff down there.
I know what you've told me before. You do know a lot of stuff. So.
And I've had the advantage of having people trust me and be willing to talk about things on the basis they knew I would never use their name.
Cool.
That I would never do anything that would draw attention to who they are or where they live. At a time, I was working with high-level defense intelligence and high-level secret experimental programs in New Mexico on UFO sightings.
Really?
Something else I got involved into. They knew that if I asked them, I would never use their name.
Uh-huh.
Never anything that would attract attention to who they were, so they could talk to me. And I never ever once violated that. So a lot of people have shared things with me that they wouldn't share with anybody else.
Cool.
In terms of the treasure hunting, I've had a lot of little things told to me, like in the northern end of the San Juan Mountains near where I used to live, way up on top there's this cave. And this one family knows where this cave is. It has a stream of water that comes out of it in the springtime, right after the snows melt. And when the water comes out, gold jewelry comes out with it.
Really?
I have no idea where that's at, other than it's high up in the north end of San Mateo. It's just one of the local little legends that we've taken from that area. There's even a lost mission down there in that country. And we looked for that for a while, too, and we couldn't find anything about it. If I could ever get you down there, I will show you a hole in the ground where there's a considerable amount of silver treasure.
Huh. I'm going to have to come visit you.
Guys actually recovered that in the middle of one night. They went in there and took it out. Spanish had a trick they used to do. It's what I call show and tell treasure. They put a little bit of treasure right where you can see it. You'll take that and think, aha, I'm rich. And you won't notice the stuff is buried a few feet away.
I have heard that before. They're
real good at that.
The Indians used to do that also.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It was a real good way of trapping Spanish. Now, there's a little story down there in New Mexico that at a certain point there was a governor of Santa Fe who imposed a 20% tax on all gold and silver coming out of Colorado and northern New Mexico. If you want to transfer it down the El Camino Real, you had to go through him. He took 20% off the top, and the king took 20%. So you had like 60% left, and a lot of guys felt that's just not enough. So they set up means of creating alternative trails, one to the west, which came down through the Malapai Reservation south of Grants, and one to the east that came out someplace of the southern Sangre de Cristo Mountains. There's this big plain over here that's a volcanic plain, and they cut a trail through there, and they come down and met the El Camino de Real from 100 to 150 miles south of Santa Fe. And that's where they would connect their treasure up and everything, and that's where the Apaches would raid them. And the Apaches would sit up in the hills and wait for them to collect. And when they got a certain amount enough together, they'd just rush down there and kill them all. Take the treasure and bury it someplace where they didn't think anybody would look for it. Take the mules up in the mountains and butcher them and jerky the meat. And they were real big at that. They did that for like about, 200 years before they were finally brought off, put into prison and moved down to Florida and later to Oklahoma. So yeah, they were very successful with that, and they left a lot of treasures there in New Mexico. And the one that I know of, the friends I had that actually got involved in it, is called Geronimo's Gold. And it is the treasure that Geronimo tried to use to buy his freedom from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The soldiers would come in and he would say, "Psst, I take you to the biggest treasure on earth if you set me free." Of course, they didn't believe him, so he tried somebody else. Finally, it got into the commanders that he was trying this, so they could come out and made him shut up. but he knew where one of the biggest treasures on Earth was, because that's the one they had been stashing for 200
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
And where they did that is someplace down in the southern end of the San Mateo Mountains. Now, there's a little area down there called Ojo Caliente, which used to be one of their big stomping grounds. When the cavalry would look for them, they'd go into Ojo Caliente because they could hear the cavalry 20 miles away due to the rock formation and stuff. And there was a spring there, so they had water, and they had a natural means of knowing who was coming upon them. So by the time the cavalry got there, they were long gone. And they loved those mountains there, even though they were considered Arizona Apaches. They were still considered Apacheria. The many nations that composed the Apache Empire, man, they just loved New Mexico and Arizona. But some of them, such as the Jicarilla, actually wandered up into Colorado. Would attack wagon trains and things up there, because their natural reservation lies right on the Colorado line. That's the Jicarilla Reservation. It goes up to the Colorado line.
Huh.
And I don't know if you've heard of the town of Dulce, New Mexico.
Nope.
You haven't? I'm surprised you haven't heard of Dulce. There's supposed to be a big underground government base there.
Really?
It was built back in the 50s.
Oh, maybe I have heard of that. Maybe I have.
And that is on the Jicarilla Reservation. I don't know if I buy that or not. For a long time, I kept saying, well, how could they do it and not have the Apaches know about it? And then they began to come up with records saying there was some major construction that went on there about 58, 59. So maybe it's real.
Huh.
It could be. I know one thing, the government likes the big underground bases. They love that.
Well, you hear rumors and conspiracy theories about that all over the place. So, in fact, I remember back when I was in my 20s, I was doing a job on Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. And I'd fly back and forth to Salt Lake every now and again because it was only $25 one way. And so one time I happened to sit next to a guy who I was talking to him, and he was telling me that the military recruited him at a young age because he was really smart and brilliant, and that he was involved in helping them do construction of these secret bases. And he told me you could wander out there in the desert and walk right over the top of a military base, and you wouldn't know you was walking on top of one. So that was way back in the 80s that he told me that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're really good about hiding those things. They're really good about those underground bases. And they're all interlinked together by a huge tunnel system. They've got a borer that's like 24 feet in diameter that bores something like a mile an hour.
Huh.
It's a nuclear-powered borer. So they can set those things down there and just point it in a line and off they go.
Huh.
That's how they plan on taking what they consider the elite population and just shuffling down there when the society falls apart. Which doesn't include me, I'm sure of that.
Me and you are left out, huh?
Yeah, we're going to be upstairs. And I'd rather be upstairs anyway. I don't want to go underground for years and years. So these people got some weird ideas. There's a lot of little things I've heard of that I would like to check out. One of them is a story of diamonds from central New Mexico. About a little kind of place called, how's that pronounced? I think it's called Pedernales, a little kind of railroad town that's right on the edge of a railroad. And some guy was wandering around down there, and he got hit by a real heavy rainstorm, and he wandered into this cave. And there were some crystals on the inside of the cave, so he dug them out, took some with him out to California, found out they were diamonds.
Really?
And it never located again. I do get involved in a little bit of diamond geology. I've got what I believe I found is a kimberlite. Which is out actually, let's see, it would be southeast of here where I live. It's not a very big one, probably no more than 300 feet across, but some of the small ones produce more diamonds than the big ones.
Huh.
And of course, until I actually start doing some work on it, I don't even know if it's got anything in it.
Right.
There are blank kimberlites. So, yeah, that's what I'm looking for summer.
Awesome.
One of the things. That, and we've got a Spanish treasure near here which I believe is big, and it's about 10 miles away from my house. And as soon as I can get down there and actually get in past the mud that's there now, I want to start looking for the alternative scientific name, how to lay the thing out. I think I can see the center, and if I'm right, then there'll be something that'll mark the north and the south boundary and the east and the west boundary. You had that guy on there one time talking about that. And he was pretty right on that, too, except
Oh,
I
yeah?
think he had one or two things off.
Huh.
What I don't think he understood was that when the king would send guys out to work the smelters, to actually set up the melting of the bars at a mine,
Uh-huh.
they properly deeded to a group. The only people he trusted were the masons.
Oh, really?
So he would send out master masons to actually run the smelter locations.
Hmm.
They would guarantee that he got his king's
Yep.
fifth.
Yeah.
They would properly stamp the bars and everything would go exactly where it was supposed to go. And they would build the vaults. And these guys were very, very good about building vaults. They were deep. Uh, I had some friends who got involved in looking for a treasure on federal ground down in New Mexico. I'm not going to say which federal ground or what their names were.
Yeah.
But they had an instrument they called a ground penetrating laser that would only detect gold. And they detected this large cache of gold, and they started digging into it at night. They dug into it from the hours of like 1 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the morning, so they wouldn't be seen.
Uh-huh.
They dug a hole 150 feet down and broke into this vault containing 100 tons of Spanish gold bars. And when they were taking up the first bar, putting it over their heads and setting it on the ground, they set it on the shoes of the FBI agent who was there to arrest them.
Really? They
They
just
were on
watching
federal
him.
reservation, and the nearby Indian police had seen him and had reported him for digging up a drug stash.
Oh.
They didn't know it was going to be gold bars, but they arrested the guys and confiscated the gold.
Huh.
So, yeah, there are things like that all over the place that the Spanish are real good about leaving around. You know, they put it down in the ground and then they get killed, or they die, or they would get sick and wouldn't come back.
Yep.
So much of that has happened in Utah too. And then you've also got some really big vaults, which the master masons built. And they know how to put very elaborate traps into them.
So, I've heard about these vaults and I wondered about that, but now that you're saying that the Masons would do that, that would make sense of why they're so deep and so well built and all that. If that's, if that's the way it was, then that would make sense.
When you hear somebody about, I recovered a couple of bars of gold, a couple of bars of silver, what they found was the guys who collected it out of the mines, took it from the Indians, took it over to the smelter, got paid a little finger bar, and they went and buried it.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they never got back to it.
Yeah.
The big vaults, those were all built by the master masons.
Well, you hear some of these big vaults, the big stashes of gold like Victoria Peak, like things like that.
I actually knew a guy who ran a construction company. It's called Hennessy Erector. He did very big steel construction work. And he got involved in trying to open up Victoria Peak when it was in the Watergate thing back in Congress. They actually had it introduced into the record of Congress. This treasure was there, and they wanted to get permission from the Army to go dig it up. By bringing a lot of political pressure against it, they got permission to go down there and dig this thing up.
Uh-huh.
When they got to the bottom, they found an empty lunchbox and a yellow T-shirt that said "Go Army."
Yep. And some names, some Army names of some of the Army people on the walls. Yep.
Yep. And that was it. The rest of it was gone. The Army got it.
Yep.
Now, how much that Noss and two of the other moved around to secondary locations, don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's gone too. I got information on it that it got, when it got moved, Noss got killed the next morning, and then the guy that helped him hide it up, he didn't really know where they was at, but he went back and took some people back to try and locate it, and they found empty holes where they figured it was. So somebody else had gotten it. I think there was 110 bars total, something like that.
That doesn't surprise me. Those things certainly exist. People forget that in 1682, when the Indians revolted to drive the Spanish out, they were trying to take all this stuff out to the mountains down to Mexico. From Colorado, from Wyoming, from Arizona, New Mexico. They were trying to get everything down to old Mexico where they could protect it.
Uh-huh.
And the Indians got ahead of them and cut them off. They couldn't even get down to the Rio Grande River for water. They had to go east of the Rio Grande River through what is now called the Jornada del Muerte, the Journey of Death.
Huh.
Literally hot, burning, dry country, frequently 120 in the summer, no water whatsoever. And they would start pouring this treasure out any place they could find if they thought they could get back to it. And they were having massive amounts of stuff. And the Indians got closer, they just started shoveling it like crazy into holes and things, and thinking if we get back alive, I'll know where it's at.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of them didn't get back alive.
Right.
A lot of them got killed along the way. A lot of them died of sickness. They died of dehydration. And, of course, the thing is, the Spanish didn't get back for 11 years. And none of that stuff that the Indians hid has ever been found. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
None of the mines have been found, even though they had clear records of where those mines were. They've never been recovered.
Yeah, well, those Indians, they was put in slavery. They was tortured. They was worked to death in the mines, and so it was it was death to them. So it took whatever the whole tribe. It took whatever it took to cover them up, hide them up, and so that they wouldn't be put into slavery again to mine them mines. So yeah, whatever it took,
But they found new deposits, and they finally gave up searching for the old ones because the new ones were just as rich. And of course, it's from the new deposits that we have our historical record of what was recovered.
Mm.
The old ones, nobody kept records back then. It was all written down in like journals and diaries and little maps that guys would make saying, okay, if I find this, I'll know it's so far over to this. And if you couldn't find that, you had no orientation on it. And then a lot of them, like they would invert the map directions. They would change them around.
Oh, yeah. They'd mirror image them. Yep.
And a little trick they did, once they did down in the Superstition Mountains, is they would mark a location of a mine up on the side of the hill, and you go up there and dig into it, and you would find a tunnel. When you get to the end of the tunnel, there's nothing there. And by then you come to the understanding that you've been filling it up down below where it's really at.
That's what they figured they did with in Johnson's Canyon, where old Freddie Crystal figured he thought he knew where Montezuma's treasure was. He dug in. They found all these blank tunnels, but all the dirt that they'd dug out, they put it down in the ravine below, and finally they figured that it was down below where they just filled everything up. And
nobody wanted to dig it a second time.
Yep.
After that, you feel kind of foolish, and you want to get out of it.
Well, yeah, you're it's just a guess that it's down there, and they don't want to spend the time to to dig all that to find out, because their first efforts was worthless.
Yeah, the Spanish were real good at that. They actually got it from the Aztecs.
Ah,
Aztecs were very good at hiding stuff. They got their dowsing techniques from the Aztecs.
Really?
About, let's see, this would have been about 1995. A guy told me about a study that went on at the University of Utah, where they got a whole bunch of dowsers together, and they set up a couple of targets around the campus there. And they said, okay, go out and see what you can find. And most of them never found it.
Uh-huh.
But of the guys who did find it, they got exactly the same type of targeting, the same type of signal came through whatever they were using. And when they put it together statistically, it always showed a flat line, a peak, a flat line, and a peak. That's how the Aztecs looked at the thing, was by finding these two witness spots, and they would start working between them, and that's how they would locate the things that they dug on. And that's, of course, the Spanish just borrowed it. Of course, they made Indians do it in slavery. So, that is definitely certain that you could trust the kind of results like that, but they did.
Huh.
And they found a lot of stuff. I know up there in the Uintas, I believe I told you about this. I had a very unusual experience in the Uintas one day. We were going for camp out, and we got there early, and it was locked up. So we decided, we'll just go for a drive around. This was up off the Weaver River. So we went up to Smith and Morehouse Reservoir, and we had pulled out in one of the overlooks of the reservoir there, and we were standing there, and all of a sudden I had this incredible feeling that something was going on behind me I should pay attention to, and I turned around and looked, and there was 4 Spaniards leading about a dozen Indians up the canyon there that I could see. They had old-style armor on, their blunderbusses. One guy was on horseback, and he had totally gold inlaid clothes and this big crusted jewel. And the Indians were all in chains, and they were being pushed up the hill.
Huh.
And I looked at this, and I got the guy on the horseback's name is Antonio de Frigalis. And some time later, I was talking to a friend of my Hopi Indian, who's also dead now, unfortunately. And he said, I found his ring on White Peak where the Indians killed him.
Really?
So that was confirmation to me and him. And I walked up to another place where we got above the actual Smith and Morehouse Reservoir, and there was a campground there. And I walked my son and child up to places, and if you dig right here, you will find 2 Indian bodies that they shot just to make a point on the other ones. They weren't trying to get away, but they were shot in the back anyway. And I said, at this point, if you go to the right, there are 11 mines of silver over to White Peak. And if you go to the left, there are 13 mines of gold all the way over to where the mountains go down into the prairies over there. It was on that trend at that area. Mostly what they found at White Peak was a lot of silver. There was gold there as well, but there was a lot of silver. And there's another mine there that hasn't been located yet, which has got huge plates of silver in it. And we're talking plates of silver like this and about this thick. It has not been found yet. I think that's the mine of the Black Bull. It's located on that trend.
So I know that the waybill of the Las Josephine mine, which a lot of people thinks on White Peak, talked about slabs of virgin silver. So that's what you're talking about, is the slabs of virgin silver?
What I'm saying is there's another mine there that hasn't been uncovered that has the same thing.
Ah.
That it's more towards the east, but it's on that same trend. Sometime we might go up there and take a look at that. Do a little walking and see what we can find.
Cool.
I'd love to do that. I'd love to get out and hike. If ever gets warm, man, I head for the mountains if I can get up there. My favorite place here is about 11,000 feet.
Oh, man.
Takes me about 2 hours to get up there, too.
Wow. So, Randy, I know that you're also, besides treasure hunting and figuring out minerals and geology and how to break down the compound ores or whatever you want to do it, you also are into prophecies and end times, and you have your own website, and you do videos on going over the prophecies and things like. What's your YouTube channel name?
Okay, it's called Spirit Fire 100, and you get that by doing www.youtube.com/user/SpiritFire100.
Okay.
Right. Matter of fact, you could probably plug in Randy Hecker and get there, because I've got like 38, 39 videos there now.
Cool. And I'll leave a link at the bottom in my description to your YouTube channel so that people can go check that out, because I know, you're one heck of a researcher on a lot of different things on treasure hunting, but also on end times and revelation things. So I will leave a link to your YouTube channel so people can check you out, and then also they can communicate with you there and about other things. So
sure. I put my email address up there on it every time I end it, so anybody who wants to email me, they can.
Awesome.
Because I absolutely love to talk with people.
Awesome. Well, I know, man, that I've talked with you, man. One time, man, it was for like 2 hours, and you just told me nonstop stories and informations, and you're a wealth of knowledge, and man, I appreciate you sharing with us. So,
you remember talking about the flashes of light associated with treasures?
Yes.
And I told you about that incident I had that experience with part of Montezuma's Treasure, and we were looking for a flash of light on top of the mountains when we had that. I never connected that.
I don't
But
remember you saying about the flash, but I remember telling you other things, but I don't remember you saying about the flash.
we were looking for a blue color up above the mountains called Misty. Do you remember that?
Yeah?
Okay, that's what we'd gone up there to look for. But we didn't see it. Instead, we had the other experience. And I'll
Yeah.
share that.
Yeah, okay.
The three of us were up there looking for Misty at about midnight. They said, oh, it always comes out about midnight. It's a blue color that moves across the top of the mountains just above the rocks. And we're up there, and all of a sudden, all three of us heard this chime. And I stood up and said, a chime? That's unusual here. And one of them said, yeah, that was weird. And the third guy says, I wonder where that came from. We turned around, and to our perspective, all of Albuquerque was gone. All we could see was just desert and rolling hills and the river way down there in the distance of the Rio Grande River, and that was it. But we saw these lights coming up from the south along the western edge of the Montana Mountains. And as we watched, they got closer. They were about, 2,000 to 3,000 men carrying huge things of gold on their shoulders, where they would have anywhere from 2 to 8 guys and one end of it just carrying it on their shoulders because of the great weight.
Huh.
Now they had these flute players and drummers and guys that would play reed instruments and things marching along, and they took this into a place in what's called the Sandia Mountain Pyramid, and we could see this big open door there, and these whole bunch of guys went in there, and only like about a dozen came out. And one of them was a medicine man. I think 2 of them are medicine men. They went around and they hypnotized men to die and to forever guard that spot. And I actually know where some of them are buried.
Huh.
Because they attack people now. They throw rocks and things at them, trying to get them to get away. And then the medicine man sealed it up and killed himself.
Really?
So the Spanish would never find it.
Huh.
And that is part of Montezuma's Treasure. And when we saw him sealed up, we saw him kill these guys, and the last of the guy killed himself, it just all of a sudden everything changed, and Albuquerque was back around us again. So I have no idea what that was. We all saw it.
Yeah, why do you think that you was allowed to see that?
I don't know. I've never been up to it. I've never tried to get into it because I know the thing is loaded with one trap after another.
Huh.
And I don't know anything about Aztec traps at all. It would be fatal to try and go in there without knowing something about them.
Ah.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen the Indiana Jones movies and the traps. They were much worse than that.
Huh. So do you think it was some kind of a, you talked about these vaults that the Masons would make. Do you think it was some kind of a vault that the Aztecs made, or do you think it was a natural cave and then they just sealed it up, or do you think it was a man-made vault type thing, or?
It was a vault.
So it was man-made.
Made. The Aztec at that time were actually starting to move back up to the area they called Axland, which is where the Salt Lakes is at. They were going to move back there because that's where they believed they came from, and life was easier. It wasn't a dry desert. It was a lot more area, a lot more animals, and everything like that. They had another thing. They believed that when Cortez showed up, he was the return of the white gods. And they just threw everything open to him until they found out how he would slaughter anyone to get the golden jewels.
Right.
And they just started, they started slaughtering population right and left to get into the temples and the pyramids and get all that stuff out of there. And of course, the Indians then, when they took Montezuma captive and said, "You'll bring all that to us or we'll kill your sheep," off it went to already pre-built vaults.
So they were already pre-built. Huh?
I know there were at least 2. One in southern Utah. You know about that one.
Yep.
And one there in New Mexico. There's supposed to be another one in New Mexico up around the area where Montezuma was actually born. He was born at the Pecos Reservation on the south end of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. He was not a natural-born Aztec Indian.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
He was considered the last natural chief of Hatchland, which is why they put him in chief down there.
So you're thinking Aztlan was there in New Mexico? Was there a great salty lake in that area? Was there?
No, that's up in the Salt Lake City area.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
call Great Salt Lake now. Bonneville Lake, that was what they were heading up to. But they had constructed these vaults to move things along the way and then go back and get more.
Oh, gotcha.
And nobody could get into them in the meantime.
So did you see how they sealed them up? How did they hide it up? Did you tell that?
They did was they inlaid it with rocks inside there. They closed it over. They cemented it over so there's no seeing it from the outside. And then they killed these guys to guard it forever. And that's how I actually got first into that. Somebody came up to me one night and said, "Hey, you want to go up with us where the hillside throws rocks at us?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, there's this hillside up here on the Sandias that you stay there long enough, rocks will get thrown at you from the bushes and things."
Really?
So this I got to see.
Yeah.
And that's where we later had that experience at.
Huh.
So that was the Aztec spirit guardians actually throwing the rocks. They just used the natural stuff around there to try and ward people off. And I know of at least 2 of those sites there, but still a considerable amount of ways up the mountain to where this is at. So I don't know how many others are buried there. When they came out, that thing was sealed up like a tomb, literally. And there were 2,000 to 3,000 men left inside of it. And they could have been killed under the same pretense. You will stay here forever as guardians of this treasure until Montezuma comes back for it. And I'm sure in southern Utah it was the same way. Now, there's another story that came out in Coronado's Children by Frank Dobie.
Mm-hmm.
That on the northeast side of the Sandias, this guy fell into a cave. And when he got a bunch of dust and everything in there, when he got his vision cleared up, he struck a torch and there were all these silver bars stacked there. And he went to pick up one and the voice said, "Do not touch that. That is for Montezuma." And he got out of there real fast. And I have no idea where that's at. It's someplace up in the mountains there. There's another little area up in the mountains that I have not been able to connect with. It's on the north side of the Sandias, where the Spanish had an old, incredibly rich silver mine they called the Cat's Claw. And they had that before they got wiped out. Every now and then they find silver nuggets around there. They've never been able to trace where they come from. And some of those silver nuggets have weighed like 5 and 6 pounds. That's something else I wouldn't mind looking for, but it would take a lot of work. I know it's up in a series of canyons that are laid like the paw of a cat, but which one, I don't know.
Man, you got a lot of information.
Well, I've collected it most of my life. And as I told you before, I'm 70 years old. I don't want to die with me. I had all kinds of medical problems, and the doctors seem to think I could keel over at any time, even though I've outlived most of my doctors. They still think I could go at any time, but I have a tendency to think I'm going to live to about 150.
Awesome.
But that's me.
Awesome. Well, Randy, man, I appreciate you sharing with us, and man, I'm gonna have to twist your arm and get you to share more with us later on. So, man, I appreciate you.
I would be happy to go over some very specific things and some very specific information.
Yeah, that would be cool to if we pick a specific story and go over it, and maybe get a group of people together to with your direction to go after it and see how we do and split it up.
I have no problem with that.
Awesome. You're awesome, Randy. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's a wrap, and I appreciate it.
You have a very good night.
Thank